Sit wherever you feel comfortable. No, I'll just stand. So you take a seat. It's a bit full up at the front here. Has everyone got water? Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to an amazing panel event we've got coming up now. We have a fantastic panel for you. We were just discussing amongst some of us, the previous one was a high-level panel. So we were wondering whether we should call you our low-level panel, particularly as we've got Netherlands and Bangladesh here. They are low-lying panel at risk, serious risk of the impacts of climate change hitting them and affecting them. So, they are on the front line here of what water and climate really means and why we're talking about this today. And it's really exciting for me to be here. And I'm slightly filling because I know people are going to wander in because who could resist coming and hearing about all of this? We're summarising today, and we're going to hear from this fantastic panel in a minute about water and climate and what that means in terms of the NDCs and the NAPs, and how do we really kind of make sure that that planning and that thinking comes together in countries' plans, and what that means in terms of how we implement and really make a difference. Because I'll say this again in a minute, but NDCs and NAPs are amazing at bringing all the issues together. You've got to do something with those plans. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and that's what we've been talking about today. My name's Kate Hughes, and I'm the CEO of the Resilient Water Accelerator, which is being incubated within WaterAid. And the Resilient Water Accelerator is designed to mobilise climate finance into these communities by bringing together public and private finance to actually shift the way that people think about financing water, because we know that enough finance isn't coming through. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm particularly excited to be here too, because my previous job was in the UK government, and I worked on the NDC partnership. And I also was responsible for writing the UK's NDC. So I've been there, I know how hard it is, and I know how important it is as well. So that's why I am delighted to be here at this session as well. Javi, come and join us. We're talking about water. Although maybe you're going to the voluntary carbon markets meeting, which is just across the corridor in a building just opposite. I know, but he's going to another event, very exciting, talking about how we're going to finance water using voluntary carbon markets. Isn't that amazing? Because water is adaptation resilience, and it's also mitigation. Okay, that was good. We're all going to be very informal here now. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to just give you a quick overview of what's been talked about today here in the various discussions that we've been having as well. And then we're going to have some questions for this panel, and we're going to keep it nice and lively as well, because, we all know what COPs are like as well. So what have we heard today here? Water is everywhere, and it needs to be everywhere in the climate solutions. So it has to be fully integrated across the NDCs and NAPs. It's about everyone. So we are all part of this climate solution and the water solution. If we're not thinking about everyone, the governments, the private sector, the communities on the front line, civil society, businesses, we're not going to address the water challenges here as well. And it's everything as well. It's all of these sectors coming together. Water is, I keep on talking about the blue thread running through all of these different challenges as well. Water is through not just climate, but it's obviously about agriculture, nutrition, health, education, gender, equality. All of those things are absolutely essential if we're thinking about water as well. And we've got to bring together the top down and the bottom up. So everywhere, everyone, everything. And particularly, we've heard a lot today as well about how nature is absolutely critical to this as well, and ecosystems. And if we're not really addressing climate change and thinking about this, then ecosystems are going to be hugely at risk as well. Farming communities, agricultural land and water will be affected, and we can't afford for that to happen. And what do we need to do now? Well, we need to commit and we need to change how things are done. We've seen it happen in renewable energy. And actually people understand that renewable energy is what mitigation means. It means much more than that, but that's often been the touch point. And in the same way, when we think about adaptation, resilience and our NAPs, we need to be thinking about water as well. We need to see commitments from governments from here through to COP31 and beyond, and to start thinking beyond just the next meeting, the next COP, but developing a plan so that we can actually make these commitments come together. And we must remember, as I've said, that the Paris Agreement is about all three elements. It's about mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And water is about all three of those as well. So we've got to then get on and take action. We've got to implement these plans as well. And it's really important that we then build up the enabling environment. And one thing we've particularly heard today is about partnerships and actually getting depth. We can't address these issues anymore as just a high-level line on a piece of paper. We've got to get beyond the talk, and we've got to implement, and we've got to get beyond piloting now, because things are happening too fast, and this low-level panel will tell you what that means in terms of reaching scale and making it happen in all countries. So implementation, and the previous panel also said that 90% of NDCs have got water in them, but that's not being implemented or financed. We need the finance, and we need to think about these systems and all the different elements coming together. So that's hard. We know that's hard. And we know it's hard enough to write it on a bit of paper and to put it into an NDC or an app. So the implementation is even harder. But fortunately, this amazing panel is going to talk us through what some of the solutions are as well. Rather than introduce them all from me now, I'm going to ask them each a question. Maybe let's go around. We'll just get everyone to say who they are, and then they're each going to have a little bit of a question to give you a sense of how they're approaching these problems. So I'm just going to pass the microphone down, just who you are and where you come from.
Thank you. Thank you. There. I'm Partho Parthivathshik. I'm the Director for Programs and Policy Advocacy in Water in Bangladesh.
I'm Jacob Granit, Director General for the Swedish Agency for Development Cooperation.
Okay. I'm Sonda Mumba, the Secretary General Convention on Wetlands, based in Switzerland.
I'm Hamad Khan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of WWF in Pakistan.
John Matthews, Executive Director for AGWA, Alliance for Global Water Adaptation.
I'm Rachel McDonnell. I'm the Deputy Director General at the International Water Management Institute.
René van Hel, I'm the Director for Inclusive Green Growth at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands.
Fantastic. And René, keep the microphone, because I think I'm going to come to you first. And René and I know each other through very exciting work on NDCs and NDC partnership and so on. And actually, it was René who, just over a year ago at an NDC partnership meeting said, why is no one talking about water? Why are we not prioritising this at the NDC partnership? And I thought, what a smart man. And the Netherlands has been fantastic at really kind of advancing this agenda. You're part of the water partnership here at COP28 and had the UN Water Summit as well. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about what financing, what initiatives need to come together to help us succeed with getting water into the NDCs.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's a big challenge for us donors to get our act better together. And I think we're slowly going there. I was at the World Bank annual meeting, and there you saw sort of a new, we're on a Sunday, so let's say a new holy trinity, in the sense that development, fighting biodiversity loss, and avoiding climate change are really seen as interlinked. And I think that water is a great global denominator between those three challenges. And while we're dealing with water as a really relative scarce resource instead of something that is abundant and really making it to the heart of our economic planning, it will also allow us to create platforms on which governments, public institutions, and the private sector can better work together to deal with climate change and climate adaptation. So that's what I think is really key. Really need to make it part and parcel of our policy making, and that's not happening yet. And when we want to move from projects to more programmatic approaches, and for example, more landscape approaches, then you also see that water can really be a catalyst for that kind of inclusive policy making.
Great, thank you. And I think you're bringing together this notion about the different strands of water and how it touches many different parts of what we need to be thinking about. So maybe Jakob, I can come to you next, and we'll pass the microphone down, because it's exactly this issue about the multiple benefits that are generated when we think about water and climate and finance and development all coming together. And it'd be great to get your views on how do we really maximise those benefits.
Right, thank you. First of all, I think it's great to be in this pavilion, even if it's a low-level panel. I think it's a very, very important topic, and I can note here that there are quite a few supporters, actually, of the topic. Just to frame my intervention here, I've been working probably on water resources for development for many, many years, 30 years, but my last period of work was as Director General for our Agency for Marine and Water Management in Sweden. We did also some international work. But the issue there is that not only in our developing context we see struggles to finance necessary water management to tackle societal development. We also see the same issue, I think, to a large degree in our developed societies. So in our case, for example, we have been implementing now for almost 10 years the EU Water Framework Directive, which is supposed to lead to view our water resources as a strategic resource for national development, for transboundary collaboration. But yet it's not there, right? And we have been working on all sorts of topics over the years to spearhead this. We are talking about the nexus. Yes, we know water is critical for energy generation, for pumping, for storage. We need it for our cooling, so it's critical for energy. Water for agriculture, as we heard, is absolutely critical for generating food for markets. Water for our growing cities, it's critically important, and water for households and for our ecosystem services, which we have representation from here in the panel. So we know all this, yet it's not part of our national planning. So in our work, in our agency, we realized we can't just talk water anymore, so we have to identify where can we fit it. So we were spearheading really getting the water resource story into national planning, overall national planning. That means roads, energy systems, transport systems in general. Everywhere there's connection to water. And in all those silos that we are experts in our own development, we don't find water, right? So we have to really move it up in the national planning framework and then drill it down to the river basin and the watershed and locally and so forth. I think we are seeing actually some progress on that right now, because the legislation from the EU is forcing us to address it from the outset. It's forcing us to address water quality problems and also restore all the old sins that we have, because otherwise we are punished by the EU Commission and have to pay fines, right? So it starts to become a push for it, really. Now, that's one way of doing it. It's not an easy way of doing it, but it's one way of doing it. And we have to comply in the Netherlands as well as in Sweden to our joint legislation. And I think it's actually beginning to change the way we are addressing water now in our own society. Now, in the context of the global, we need also, as we know, talked about here, we need to finance this in a structured manner. And then, of course, the national development plans that we are now here are critical. But unless it's said, let's finance water, we are not going to succeed. It has to be, water is the prerequisite for all the other development. And we will hear from our colleagues from Pakistan and so forth. We know how difficult this is if we are not dealing with it, because the impacts of not dealing with it are tremendous in terms of droughts and floods and the impacts on our ecosystems all along. So another argument we have been using for a long time is to try to connect it also to the oceans and the coast. So we are talking about this concept for source to sea. Right? So if we want to save our coastal lines and our oceans, we can't do that in the oceans. It's actually happening upstream. So that's another argument for really enforcing strong legislation to reduce pollution and to ensure we are using our water resources effectively, for migratory fish from oceans to the freshwater systems and so forth. So it is something is happening, but when it becomes part of energy policy, when it becomes part of national planning, then it really can begin to take off. So I think this is promising, that we have a little panel here in a big COP event. Hopefully, it should be the real biggest panel, like we had this morning with Madam here on moderating our session on disaster risk and reduction and peace and conflict. This is the same thing. So I hope you will chair as a panel like that next year, will you? Thank you.
Well, thank you. And that's a great kind of segue into passing to Masunda as well, to talk about actually that this element about collaboration and everyone working together and seeing water everywhere. And it would be great to come to you to sort of just tell us a bit more about how do you think these different actors, stakeholders can all contribute together if we're going to really address these challenges. And I guess particularly with this, your role in looking at wetlands and bringing in that nature dimension as well.
No, thank you so much. I just want to say that I'm going to be a little controversial here, partly because I'm really fortunate to be in a role where I am heading a treaty, 172 contracting parties, Sweden and the Netherlands over here, and many, in fact, we have 6 international organization partners, WWF, IMI, and obviously Bangladesh, which is also one of our contracting parties. So I'm in the middle of the collaboration. For this work to happen, we cannot do it alone. But I want to say, we all met in March when the beginning of multilateral conversations began. It was the second World Water Conference, second in 46 years. What was that all about? 46. How do we wait so long to have a very in-depth conversation for that one liquid that sustains this planet? And I just happened to meet, and thanks to Henk Oving, who was the then special envoy on water, I had a meeting and a dinner with a few like-minded people, and I just happened to meet some people from the water utilities from New York. And this lady was amazing, very switched on, and we had a very good conversation. And I said, well, what's your source of water for New York? And she had a giggle, and she's like, Masunda, actually, it comes from your wetlands. Because New York, 18 million people. Oh, there's Henk. Hello. I just invoked your name. And 8 million people upstream of New York are dependent on water to flow into that city, and for that supply to be there. But the same thing happens in our respective communities. But back to the question of collaboration. As a convention, we make sure that the work that we do, back to your point on Ridge to Reef, is how do we have all these different sectors and different dimensions? Our treaty is the oldest and most experienced MEA. I was in Nairobi on plastics just a few weeks ago, and I said, look, we cannot talk about plastics without talking about wetlands. We cannot talk about wetlands without talking about food systems. We cannot talk about that without talking about health. Today is the Recovery and Peace Day. We cannot talk about water without talking about peace. It is the one blue thread, as you rightly said, Kate, that goes right through how do we bring all the different stakeholders and players together and really have a conversation. And my wish, frankly, is even by the time we're getting to COP30, it should be blown out onto the, big screens in, I don't know, theaters, spaces, schools, everywhere. Why does this topic matter? And all that, since we're the low-level panel, children. I asked, my daughter was doing a project at her school in Switzerland on wetlands. And she said, Mama, I'm going to do something about your convention. Don't be mad. And I said, it's okay. She's 11. And she took our website, showed it to her 11-year-old friends in her class. I had 10 pages of comments from children. We need you to strike this. This does not make sense. We don't know what you're explaining here. Your wetland definition doesn't make sense. And they were so brutally honest. And this generation of children are thinking very collective. This is what matters for me. I may be from Kenya, but I live in Switzerland, and I'm here in the Alps, and I can't go skiing because there's no snow. in the mountains, and there's hardly any water to cool those, nuclear stations for energy provision, but she wants to go skiing. Sorry, there's no ice. And so this collective connection, and this morning, back to your point about early warning systems, and we had obviously the discussions from Nepal and the connections, the reach to reef. When you talk about the mountains, for example, and the implications further downstream as we go into the Bengal Delta, the complexities of what we saw in Pakistan, it's really around how we've managed our wetland systems, how we've collaborated, how this information goes beyond just putting the word water in NDCs or in national adaptation plans. What is the true picture of the investment in realizing what we want to do? And this is why, bless the soul of Salimul Haq, he is the one who said, colleagues, we have gone beyond the element of adaptation and mitigation. It's loss and damages. There are places that will not recover in our lifetime. And how do we talk to each other really honestly and justly to say, this thing that we've taken for granted called Mother Earth, this is how it's manifesting. And the one thread that really gets us to talk to each other really on an equal footing, and sometimes unequal, is water. And I think this is why, for me, it's really an opportunity and just an honor to be with these distinguished speakers here and to really hear from what is happening at the national level. Lastly, but not the least, what I want to say, as a convention, one of the things that we do is we do have national reports and wetland inventories that are also feeding into these NDCs. They're feeding into national adaptation plans to make sure that we're not slicing the pie too thin. Our information also feeds into NBSAPs. They feed into other mechanisms, other MEA processes. People are overwhelmed. Colleagues, we're going to go our way from here in a few days and we'll be like, oh, what did we just talk about there? And we start the roller coaster again in January. But how do we find that moment now, and agree on the path forward? Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that and making it real. And I think it really comes through that water is a great leveler. We all need it, and it is in amongst all of us that inherent need for water, and yet we are not valuing it in the way that we need to, and we're not planning for it in the way that we need to, and we're not thinking about it and implementing action in the way that we need to. And let's wait for great that your daughter and her classmates are on the way up and going to be challenging us to do more. And you're right. Why didn't we, 46 years where we didn't talk about this until, thank you, the Netherlands again and Tajikistan, who brought us along to make sure that we're doing it. So let's come to John next. So it's clear that whatever we've been doing isn't working. It isn't working in the way that it needs to be working. Business as usual is not cutting through. So what do we need to change? What needs to happen so that we do have what we need to see in the NDCs and the NAPs and that water is properly recognised?
It's a really deep question. I had in 2018 I had a crazy email that came in March of that year. It was from a branch of the UNFCCC. It's called the Consultative Group of Experts, CGE. It's not a piece of poetry in the UN system as a body, and they said, we are considering organizing the first 3 official UNFCCC workshops that will focus on NDC focal points and train them in an intensive way on adaptation and resilience. And we knew we're still surveying them about topics, but we knew that water was important, and Agua is the group that keeps coming up as the group that knows about water and climate. Would you help us with it? And there's some questions that there's not really you don't say no to, and that was I felt like a calling that we needed to immediately respond and say absolutely. A few days later, I got another email from the same team, and they said, "Well, so glad that you're going to help us with it. Now we actually think that the whole workshop should be about water. Could you also help us with that?" Really excited about that. So there were 3 workshops. I went to all 3 of them. We were the only non-UN body that was involved in any of the workshops. There's one in South America, in Paraguay. There was one for the Asia Pacific in Nepal and Kathmandu, and the third one was in Togo. And for Africa, I guess they just left out Europe. And what I was really struck by, I got to meet over these 3 weeks the NDC representatives from 100 countries in a very intensive way. And what I was really struck by was they are lost, actually, that they are in the deep end of the pool and are really struggling about how to really orient themselves. And a short story from the first of those workshops, that was the one in Togo in West Africa. I was giving a talk to 50 people from 30-something countries in the room about climate risk assessment and and how you would address those risks. And there was a question that came up. It was a guy from Kenya. He was from the forestry ministry, and he said, "You've left out the main natural resources, like as the set of solutions. You've really stopped talking about water, and you've stopped talking about nature." And I was embarrassed, even ashamed. I was trained as a conservation biologist, and to kind of realize that I had left out that component, over the course, the rest of that workshop, and certainly for the next 2 workshops, we really changed what it is that we were trying to accomplish. We needed to give like kind of strategic entry points on the NDCs about where they needed to move and make sure that they were effective across the full range of sectors that they were talking about. And this, I think, comes back to, you mentioned the NDC partnership a little bit earlier in your self-introduction, and the NDCP does something that is an idea that comes from the UNFCCC itself, and maybe the kind of broader UN system, is they want to talk about water in 2 ways. They want to talk about water as a hazard, and they want to talk about water as a sector. When we're talking about resilience, even when we're talking about mitigation, we need to think about big water. Water that goes way past a sector. We're not talking about water utilities. We're talking about rural wash programs. We're talking about how water is actually an organizing principle for our whole economies, and how our economies, to bring back in Musanda's point, how our economies are integrated with ecosystems. And that is the big water message that is really missing. And yes, water is mentioned in 90% of the NDCs, but it's almost always as a hazard or a sector. And I'm telling you, that is the wrong route to go. It is not the lasting, effective, transformative route that we need water to really be able to play. So I think that is, as a kind of core message, is something that we need to really be able to amplify. In Agua, we took the lessons from those 100 countries, and we turned it into another program that's called the Water Tracker for National Climate Planning. And we've been working intensively now with some countries for 3 years already on these issues, and it's been recognized by the Green Climate Fund, by the UNFCCC itself, by some of the development banks, by a number of UN agencies, exactly in this space, that we're trying to give this message of big water as the organizing principle for how we should be thinking about NDCs. Thanks.
Wow, there you go. There's a big sort of call to action. And yeah, we need to think big, and it isn't, incremental stuff and small piece by piece isn't going to get us there at all. So thank you, John. And let's come to Rachel, because, I know you think about this a lot as well. So, what advice would you be giving to people, to partners, about how they really integrate water into their planning and their thinking, addressing some of these issues that we're talking about today?
So this is when you really have to get down local. low and local. And this is so in everywhere where you're looking at it is what does it actually mean in your NDC of water in this context? And in too many of the countries that we work in, so I'm at the International Water Management Institute, and we are very much grounded in the global south where we have our offices, and it's about agriculture, and it's about development, and it's about power systems as well. So when we're looking at how what's the advice, we need to be able to look at those different areas, and it means dropping our water thinking and coming in through the farmers, or coming in through the local power, the hydroelectric power generators, or wherever it is. And when we're talking to our farmers, it's a completely different frame of reference as to what water is. It's just an input, and an input that's often taken for granted. And yes, we're then looking at water and soil moisture, we're looking at evapotranspiration, but so often it's about irrigation from our groundwater systems and our river systems, which are very stressed. So as we're looking at watering those NDCs, is we have to look at it through that area and to be linking through to those ministries, because often the ministries responsible for food security are more powerful, and they are able to override the ministries of water. The sort of the political economy that sits behind all of this is something that we need to think about as we're taking those NDCs. So those NDCs are not just for the Ministry of Water; they're for all ministries, as you will have. So that's what that's how we begin to look at it. So we look at the local context. How is water used here? And by the way, where's the power playing out? And how can we try and bring trade-offs and thinking? Yes, we come through that water lens, but be able to do that. Then, as we're then arguing over the water, we need to, let's have some evidence on the ground. You know, where is the data? What is the evidence? What are we going to be able to do? And on the 5th of December, we will be launching with the Digital Earth Africa, which is an across-Africa platform using 25 years of satellite imagery. It's a platform where we're going to be able to generate lots of different types of data about cities, about wetlands. There's a wetland map there. And IMI has been funded to develop water. So we're going from continental scale water accounting. So you can click on a square, and at that square, which is why it's relevant, you're able to say, where does the water come from? Groundwater, desalination, treated wastewater, what's the percentage at that 1 kilometre square? And then, more importantly, who's using it? So it's, as we're looking at those NDCs, we need to say, is the water there? Is it already over-allocated? What are the water sources in there? And which are the ones that are being stressed and strained? So we've got our locally based solutions. We have our data, and it's putting it onto these platforms. IMI has a very good water data portal, which hopefully you haven't had to use because it's very difficult to do, but it's no use sitting there. It has to be on the equivalent of a data cube for Africa, and putting the water out there for others to be able to use. And then the last bit is about finance. So one of the things we are very involved with these days are accelerators. So linking to the work we have set up 4 accelerators, because when we're talking about finance, you're talking about revenue streams. When you're talking about revenue streams, I'm sorry, but people don't pay their water bills. There ain't much money in water. So we then have to, again, look outside of water. That water is generating revenue streams in agriculture or in energy. And how can we, as we design those small and medium enterprises, how are we going to ensure that, A, they are really making a difference in terms of climate adaptation, responding to the NDCs, but how are we able to use the money that they can earn from growing crops to be able to pay for the water technologies, the solar irrigation, or those other ones that are able to support water infrastructure that's needed, but is being paid for from other areas. So those are the 3 areas that we're particularly looking at the moment, and are talking when we talk with our countries on the NDCs.
Amazing, thank you. You heard it here first about this launch, a little kind of glimpse into that.
Digital Earth Africa, got to go for it. We need everybody's data on it, by the way. We need everybody's data. It's got to be the platform. Digital Earth Africa, now you Asians have got to get going. You have to go, catch up to Africa. Yeah, get going. It's catch up to Africa time, isn't it, Masunda?
Yeah, we're throwing down the gauntlet here as well. So thank you for that. And and really kind of thinking at that local level and really understanding the data, the information. And I think what's really interesting here as well is that actually most of what we talk about in water isn't high tech solutions, but this is the area where we need to apply the high tech into actually understanding, kind of the AI, the digital understanding, the satellite technology to really kind of bring our understanding to be able to map it right down from the local level up to the national level. And these points coming through about the political economy and political will, which is my segue into asking Hamad here about how do we now really make sure that we can influence national climate plans, national governments to really take this seriously and to bring it in, given your experience in working in this area in conservation, freshwater protection. How do we make it real and make our ministries, our ministers, our leaders talk about this? No, easy.
Yeah. In Pakistan's context, yes, it's very easy. Look, I mean, let's acknowledge the fact that Pakistan is one of the many countries where climate change is water change. And they have realized this a bit late. That's the unfortunate part. Take the example of NDCs. They came like in 2021. For the first time in the NDCs, it was mentioned about the nature-based solutions. Previously, never. It was a bit, mitigation, but, and then, renewables and plantations, that kind of stuff. And then, secondly, it was just in August that the National Adaptation Plan, was launched after the 22 floods. And in Sharm el-Sheikh, the message was loud and clear that what happened in Pakistan will not remain in Pakistan. And then we saw this year and we saw last year, even in Europe, in Germany, in Spain, the kind of, whether less water or a lot of water, what's happening all over. And then the second thing is that it's linked to the economy. The water economy, for many countries, is being impacted. So it's not about just climate crisis and ensuring that water is incorporated, into the national climate plans. There are millions and millions of people in a country like Pakistan. Same it goes with Bangladesh and India and many other places, where the water is really impacting the livelihoods, is impacting, the GDPs, is impacting, and then these are linked to the security issues. So you ignore one sector, you do not give that sector the deserved priority, and it has implications and impacts literally everywhere. Coming to, taking the opportunity that I'm, sitting next to Dr. Musanda and my colleague from after the 22 floods, there were two delegations. One from the Ramsar and the other from the Dutch government. They wanted to help. For the first time, they said, okay, this area used to be, regular flooding, but there are these wetlands. And a lot of these wetlands, either they've been dried or they're not being properly utilized. So they identified those wetlands which, can absorb a lot of flood water. And then eventually recharge the aquifer, good for the ecosystem, good for the migratory birds, good for the people, everything. But the problem was that a lot of development and financial institutes, they were ignoring the nature-based solutions, particularly in the water sector. They were, okay, dikes, dams, these protective bunds, that kind of stuff. Infrastructure, great infrastructure, the politicians love to inaugurate, the great infrastructures, pictures, votes, these are all, linked. And particularly the lenders, not the bilateral donors like my friends from the Netherlands and SIDA, which, take into other stuff. So I think the good thing is that it's there. And coming my last point, and in the previous panel I was listening, it was all about implementation and enforcement. I think that's the key. If the governments feel that they have these plans and there's a ministry or a department, no. I tell you honestly, as a water person and as an environmentalist, climate or the water, but they should be part of the agriculture department. They should be part of the irrigation department. They should be part of the food, everywhere, because it's not just, okay, we have this climate change ministry and they will take care of everything, and we have this adaptation plan and they will enforce it. And then you see the disconnect where these are the departments, these are the people who have to, connect with the communities, and they are not properly trained, they are not properly mandated to take, these interventions and these messages, to the next level.
Well, thank you. So you've also now kind of built us up brilliantly to kind of come to Partha. So we've heard about the national level, but it's got to be connected back down to the local level as well. And I know you work on this a lot. So again, from your expertise of working in Bangladesh and at country level, how do we really make this stronger case and amplify the local voices so that they can be reflected in those national plans?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity also to be here. The amplifications, basically, the way that, and I'm going to concentrate on NAB, not NDC, probably if I have time, then I'll go there. Just to give you an overview of the NAP in Bangladesh, it has got 8 sectors, which includes agriculture, which includes water resource management, which includes urban areas, all those kind of things. So 8 sectors, 113 interventions. And what we have been able to do, and I'll kind of elaborate on that, is we found 22 touch points for water sanitation hygiene, which we have been able to influence the government to put in. So basically, we had to, and that is where the answer lies, exactly giving examples, creating evidences, putting it forward to the government that, these are the things that are needed to be included there. So basically, to make a case for water. And, a lot of people know about water aid. So when we talk about, water aid and in water aid, we call climate crisis is water crisis. And we also go beyond and say it's an women's crisis in terms of Bangladesh. And, in Asia and in Africa, water is the responsibility of women, to be brought into the households. But so when you talk about how, we amplify this, so creating the evidence is one, doing the research and putting it up in the, with the government in the public arena to really people understand that what is the issue there in terms of water and why it should be there. The other things that, I'm pretty glad to hear, a lot of things that have been said about agriculture. And in the morning session, we also saw, somebody talk about agricultural crops, the 5 types of crops that is needed there, institutional strengthening, capacity building, all that. But finally, if we really want to, influence things, we really have to harness the political will of the governments, like Bangladesh, like, all that, and the commitment. So it is not only about that, their, issues, that the government will only have the political will and only have the commitment, and because this is not going to happen, as a lot of our colleagues have said here. It's also the CSOs, how they push for it, how they keep at it, how they really produce the evidences that water needs to be part of these, NAPs and NDCs. And just to tell you something about the NDC in Bangladesh, we have voluntary and, conditional things in the NDCs. And definitely in agriculture, as somebody was saying, exactly, I forgot whom, but, it's always about the irrigation and how it is more into the solar irrigation things that comes into, so how we mitigate from there and all that. So as you're saying, it's there, but how it is implemented is a big thing. And even if it is there, where do we get the money? And I said, For the NAPs in Bangladesh, it's a $230 billion plan. And where are we going to get $230 billion? You know, we heard about, for loss and damage, it was about, what, 444 or 45 million that has been not committed. We didn't still have the money. So it's about commitments, you know, there. But we have to have the money, and the transitional committee has said something. So even if the money is allocated, how is that implemented? So when you talk about, you know, how we influence things, these are the things that we really have to be, you know, very clear about when we talk to the government, and you know, work with them. So it's not only, and I heard, I think, last session or in the morning session, that it is not only about, you know, opposing the government. It's also about praising the government when they are doing the good things. Absolutely. So, and that is where, you know, you get the chance, you get the opportunity to really work with them, to really, you know, work side by side and influence them. So that is basically, you know, the way that things can happen in a lot of things.
Great, thank you. I mean, I'm just going to give a little kind of hint as to what's coming next, because I know you're at the end of a day and you're thinking, okay, where's this going to go? So we're going to come back round our panel just in a second, and this is a warning to them too. They're going to have 30 seconds, 1 minute, just to give us their top tip for what to do to increase inclusion of water in NDCs and NAPs. So they're warned. We've then got a really exciting announcement from our friend here, Hamad, who's going to say a little bit about something that they're about to do. Not yet, not yet. And then it's the water pavilion. We've got drinks. And it's not a dry event either. So tell your friends. So I just want to put that out there so that you know that that's coming. And while they're also thinking about this, I kind of just want to say what I'm hearing from all of this is, as we know, water is kind of everywhere and yet nowhere. And we've got to form that connection between the top down, the local led, take the information and the knowledge and the evidence from the local level and put that back up so that we are thinking big and bold into the national plans. That political will at the national level, setting out the certainty, setting out what's going to happen, which gives confidence to the investors, because we know we need finance. The finance community needs to have that certainty and needs to know what the direction of travel is as well. It's the water economy, stupid, came to mind as well, kind of to paraphrase someone as well. And that this touches us all. We talked about how this is, the great leveller. I was in Lagos recently, and it didn't matter whether the person was the CEO of a major bank in Lagos or on the front line of climate change, living in basically slum settings as well. Water was the one thing that they all understood and everyone talked about. It was touching everyone. So how do we get this to be on the agenda? So I'm going to come back round. We're going to start with Renee. We'll come back round this way. And Renee, also just because, the Netherlands is heavily involved in making sure that water is on the agenda too. So if you've got any thoughts on where this COP might leave us to, that would be great.
I think the COP is all about getting the political economy right. And as long as ministers of finance are not worried about water, we have a big issue. But I think there's also very promising things. Like on the 14th and 15th of November, there was a meeting chaired by the World Bank with ministers of finance and ministers of water in Addis, and it was countries from Southern Africa, it was countries from East Africa, and they all convened. I think that is the way forward. In the past, water was the affair of ministers of water, and with all respect for those ministers, they just don't count so much in a cabinet. So getting really the highest level of attention, which oftentimes is the head of state or the minister of finance, is super helpful. So that is the way forward. So lobby your ministers of finance, because water is also de-risking, and it's very good for a sound fiscal position of any minister of water, for finance. Thank you.
We have a very simple message: no water, no food. And just go straight with that in the countries where so much water is used in agriculture. Ministries, prime ministers worry about hungry populations. They don't worry about water quite so much. There's always water. They always seem to find. So no water for food, and let's make it happen.
Talk about what they want to talk about and relate it to water. And I have a very short story about that. I was working in South Asia a few years ago, and I got into a meeting with an energy minister. And he was very upset. I was there on behalf of the UK government, and he saw that I was from an NGO, and he said, "Well, you're clearly an environmentalist, and I want to let you know, in our country, we don't care about ecosystems." And I said, "Actually, I don't care about them either. That's not what I'm here to talk about." And he said, "Oh, well then you must be here to talk about carbon." And I said, "Actually, I don't really care about carbon either." He said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "You're building a huge new Chinese-funded coal-fired power plant." And he said, "Yes." I said, "It's a thermal system. It's water-cooled. Where does your water come from?" He said, "It comes from a canal, of course." And I said, "That's bullshit." I said, "That water comes from a glacier. And that glacier is in rapid transition. And it's going to go away. And what I want to know is the next time you have a really scarce drought, and your prime minister comes to you and says, I have 65 million farmers in this province, and I also have emerging energy needs. How are you going to sort that water out?" And he got really quiet, and he said, "I know why you're here now." And that, to me, is you have to relate water and climate to whatever they really care about and really drive it home from that angle.
Okay, the first one is the statement that I make every day in Pakistan, which is water is everybody's business. Let's make it clear. The second is, I think Rachel also mentioned that we need to treat water as a commodity, whether it's for agriculture or, and then to do that, quoting again another friend, Adil, what carbon is for mitigation, water is for adaptation. I think let's clearly understand. And to do that, we need right finance and right partnerships. Unless we have these two in place, I think it will be really difficult to manage this challenge.
No, thank you. I just want to say that, look, let's be realistic. And I think your point about the cost of actually unpacking and implementing an NAP or an NDC at the country level is just so complex for many countries. How do we, there's so many experts in this room, on this panel, how do you support a country realistically and honestly to say, here's a roadmap and here's the strategy. Let us just unpack this and see how we can phase it over time, realistically with the resources that we have. Because sometimes countries are just sitting there waiting for the millions. And the millions are not coming. So let us really be honestly and just very strategically support countries very well, a slice at a time.
When they need billions.
When they need billions. Because when they need billions, because we have to start somewhere. And we shouldn't be waiting.
Yeah, thank you. And the last few days here, we've been talking a lot about mobilizing, financing, I think in almost any session. And that's critical for any investment we want to do. But I listening very carefully to you, I still think that unless we get this into the heart of the national planning, we are going to fail. And same goes for the local municipal planning. It has to be there as well, from the water supply and sanitation sector all the way up to the strategic energy supply that we are looking at. There's no green energy transition unless we tackle the water story, as we just heard from Agua here. So it has to go in there, and I think that will be the solution moving forward, rather than again saying water and climate and specific arguments. It has to go into the planning, and then we can raise financing for this, for good hydropower, for good water and sanitation, if it's part of our planning framework? Thanks.
Thank you. Because I'm going to give you an example of how CEDA supported us in one of these. Because the evidence that we can create is one of the coastal municipalities that we were talking about is Paikgacha. So basically there for the last 10, 12 years, and definitely with your support, is we have been able to install a piped water network system, and that is being now managed by the municipality by itself. It is, and the revenue you're talking about, the revenue sustains that, and we are trying to increase that. Now we cover around 60% of the whole municipality, and we're trying to increase it so that more people can get into it. So my last thing is about creating evidence, showing it to the government that things work, not only always saying that what doesn't work, but we also have to basically also tell them what works and providing that evidence, creating the models so that people can take it on, it can be done at scale.
Fantastic. So I think that's a call to action. We need to start now. We need to show how it works. We need the evidence, and we can build from that, but we need to start building right now. We need to change how things work, because for 46 years it hasn't worked, and we haven't talked about it, and we need to get it on the agenda, and we need to be financing it and acting now. Hamad, I'm going to pass to you to let us know about something exciting.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very excited to share the Freshwater Challenge, which is the largest restoration and protection initiative in history, and an official water outcome of the COP28 presidency. So this will be the ministerial event on 10th December at the COP28 presidency pavilion. The timings are from 4 p.m. to 5:30, with countries from Africa, Asia, Europe, North and South America officially joining the challenge. I think there are few ministers who have already committed, but there will be few who will be announcing joining the challenge, and WWF is coordinating and supporting this. Just to give you an example of some of the targets, the country-led initiative to restore 300,000 kilometers of degraded rivers and 350 million hectares of degraded wetlands by 2030, which is equivalent to 30% restoration target in the global biodiversity framework. Conserve key freshwater ecosystems, and at the moment it's championed by Colombia, DR Congo, Ecuador, Gabon, Kenya, Mexico, and Zambia. It was launched at the UN Water Conference in New York. Momentum is building up, with 30 countries expected to officially join the challenge at this ministerial event and commit to action. And we also expect that private sector companies and financial institutions are also, will confirm their support and backing for this challenge. So just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and great to have that forewarning and little kind of announcement there. So I saw lots of people taking notes about when that would come out. Thank you to my amazing, amazing panel. So much experience. And actually, I think what they really did here was to pull out that blue thread. I'm going to keep on using this. But, we heard from so many different perspectives about how it is all interconnected. So please help me in thanking this amazing panel, and then we can all celebrate and chat more over our drinks.